Coming up on this episode, I'm joined by Lievin Ndimanyi to go through our Western Conference power rankings from 15 down to 1. Of course, we did our Eastern Conference power rankings a couple of weeks ago. I'll leave a link to that in the description if you haven't checked it out already. Fair to say that we found this a little bit more difficult than the East. I think looking back at that one, it's clear that Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, particularly if they get Dame, they're the three top teams in the East, and I think there's a fair gap between everyone else, particularly with the ongoing James Harden saga in Philadelphia. When you look at the West, there's Denver clearly on top after winning the championship last season, but from there, I personally think teams 2 through to 11 are pretty interchangeable, and you're probably going to find yourself disagreeing with some of these rankings that I have and that Lee has as well. So if you do disagree, if you agree, if you have any comments at all, please feel free to leave it on our YouTube channel. You can tweet me at Patu. Other than that, subscribing on YouTube, following us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify is always appreciated, and enjoy the episode. Welcome, Lee. We can't get started, mate, without asking you about your Bombers. What the hell happened? 126-point loss to the Giants. Can you try and explain it for me?
I unfortunately cannot, and I consulted with a few other Bombers supporters, mates of mine. I'm just glad the season's over because it's been a month of sliding that's been painful to watch. Some really, really tough losses in there. And yeah, quite literally just looked like one team was there, one team wasn't. When was the last time you thought about Jesse Hogan having a great game and then he has one of the all-time stat lines? I'm just glad it's over. Truthfully, mate, I can just sit back. The hope's gone, disappointment, unfortunately, is going to stay for a while. So I can't really explain it. How are you as a Pies fan? Do you know what I mean? I saw more people going down on Friday night. Any pain, disappointment, expectations? How are you feeling?
We're still going to finish top 2, so it's not really concerning me. Obviously, would like to be in better form. The last few weeks, I think there's been a clear mindset shift where the players, to me, just aren't taking it as seriously as you would like. And I, as a fan, probably aren't taking it as seriously as I was earlier in the season, simply because we're locked into where we're going to finish, and now we're just waiting for finals to come around. And the biggest issue here is not actually the losses, but the injuries that are piling up. And that's a real worry and a real concern when you not only got a bunch of injuries, but a bunch of injuries to your best players. So the AFL Premiership is certainly wide open, as is the Western Conference in the NBA going into next season. I was just saying, we were saying before we started here, doing our Western Conference power rankings a lot more difficult than the East. There's a lot of teams here that you could put anywhere. I mean, I've got a couple of what people would classify as hot takes that, you've got teams that could be anywhere between 3rd and 11th in the conference. And even like the bad teams from last season, you expect to be better and are more talented. So let's start us off here. Number 15, I've got the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm going to be saying that under the assumption that Dame does get moved either to your Miami Heat or elsewhere before the season starts. Obviously, it's going to depend on what kind of package they get for Dame, but again, I'm going to assume that it's a package built on young players and future draft assets rather than kind of any win-now assets that's going to help them in the short term. Look, you've just got to give the keys to Scoot and Shaden Sharp, don't you? Let them make as many mistakes as they want. Obviously, Scoot in his rookie season, Shaden Sharp coming into his second season. Just give them the keys, give them the ball, and see what they can do, and see if they can develop as quickly as possible to get you back into being a playoff contending team within 3 or 4 years here. Obviously, you've still got Jeremy Grant, which is the big, I guess, concern about the development of Scoot and Shaden, and whether or not Jeremy Grant being there, obviously just re-signing to 5 years, $150 million contract, one of the most controversial deals of free agency, and whether he being there, is that actually going to stall the development of those two players? Could we see a Grant trade soon after the Dame one, or sometime before the mid-season trade deadline? I'm not sure. I don't know who's going to trade for that contract. Is Yusuf Nurkic's contract going to be included in the Dame deal as well? Because he's on a pretty horrid contract there, and they're probably going to want to move on from him. Where did you have the Trailblazers? Did you have them 15th as well, or a little bit further up the list?
No, I agree with everything you just said, and I also had them 15th for many of the reasons you did. I mean, the rest of the roster, even with Dame Lillard having his career year that he did last year, they still ended up with a top draft pick. So it's pretty indicative of the rest of the roster around him, and moving him off is, I mean, point guard. If you're a point guard in today's NBA, it's hard enough, and especially if you're a first-year point guard. I feel like they're going to be scored on heavily. Nurkic as a center just isn't a defensive natured centre. The Grant contract, I'm still not going to believe it. Any contract's immovable, but his contract, wrong side of 30 and 5 years they signed him to. I also agree that he may stall their growth there. And the rest of the roster moves anyway. They re-signed Thibault, like they didn't really do anything that would make me kind of excited. They're going to have a lot of highlight plays. I mean, Scoot and Simons and Shane Sharp is going to be a lot of highlight reels. But yeah, the package that they would get back from Miami would be like Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero would be the best player they could probably get, which is probably indicative of just where the market is at the moment, unfortunately, with the length it's taking. And I mean, adding another offensive-minded guard to that combination, no other standout skills. Yeah,
Sorry to jump in. Sorry to jump in. How the hell are you going to be able to, just on your point there, how the hell are you going to be able to have Scoot, Tyler Hero, Anthony Simons, and Shaden Sharp? And I guess that's why if Miami are going to get Dame, they're going to have to find a third destination for Hero here. Because if I'm Portland, why do I have interest in Tyler Hero?
Or at least what I'm ready for is that Miami is the only market that is open for him, and how long they're willing to push this out. Because you, to me, when Scoot got drafted, that was the start of the next era, I guess, of Portland. So I guess it's really who blinks first. But yeah, if I'm talking power rankings and their position in the West, I don't see them any higher than 15, unfortunately. And it's a weak draft they're coming into, which is going to be like the one up to this. So yeah, it should be a long season for Portland Trailblazers fans.
Yeah, I mean there's some talent there, and if you've got Simons and Scoot and Sharp and Grant, plus if you got Hero, that's a pretty decent offensive arsenal where maybe you can put up games of 125, 130 points and win some games. But, I mean, defensively as well, there's probably going to be nights where you give up 135, 140. So, yeah, I'm going to find it hard to see them winning any more than 20, 25 games here, I would have thought. Anyway, moving on to 14. I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I've got the Utah Jazz. I know that's probably criminally underrating them given what they did last season, but towards the end of last season, they kind of became the team we expected them to be. They obviously fell out of the playoff mix, and I'm just wondering if there's an element here where they're surprised, having a new head coach in Will Hardy. Like, does that disappear? Do the teams start taking them a lot more seriously going into next season? And I still look at this roster and think there's a little bit of lack of talent. Are we sure that Lauri Markkanen is an all-star level player, like for the remainder of his career? Is what we saw last season from him going to be the thing moving forward, or are we going to see a reversion back to what he was for the majority of his career before last season? Is the progress linear for Walker Kessler? Like, does he automatically take another massive jump from what we saw in a really impressive rookie season? I'm not sure that's 100% the case. Like, it could just, it's not with young players. I think it's important that it's not necessarily jump on jump on jump, especially when you've got someone like Walker Kessler who surprised everyone last season. And as I said, my main point is that maybe there's an element here where they're not as a big of a surprise next season, and teams are preparing for them a lot more than what we were, which I remember going into last season thinking this is potentially the worst roster in the league and expecting them to be 14th or 15th in the West. That obviously didn't happen. I don't know. Am I criminally underrating them?
I only had them one spot higher than you, so it's not criminally underrating them. Their off-season moves, yeah, John Collins was the only, I guess, big move on there. They
Yeah.
re-signed Jordan Clarkson, kept their sort of core together. I'm not sure how much of Keontae George you got to see in his summer league. He looks like a steal, 16th pick there, just a scoring guard. Laurie Markkinen, purpose built for today's NBA, just a front court that plays in so many different ways, and I really love Will Hardy as a coach. I think that's why I have a level of excitement for Utah, because there's always one team every year. If maybe like remember the Atlanta Hawks of the mid 2010s, they were just, it's all team basketball, no standout superstar, but they played all just team basketball, move the ball a lot, efficient, fast paced. And I think if Utah Jazz are going to have any sort of success, they're going to follow that team basketball sort of build. Walker Kessler, again, I mean, he does like 85% of what Rudy Gobert does, which is kind of funny in that regard on a rookie salary. So I've got faith in Utah because of, Will Hardy and the fact that they're going to keep developing players. I think Will Hardy, he comes from like coaching trees of like the Spurs and Boston and everything like that. So it's natural that he's a great coach. They're missing that, obviously, that star, like initiator, that guy that can just grab the ball, make plays for everybody, score at the end of games. That's obviously what's going to hold them back. I only had them one spot higher. I had the Spurs 14. Obviously, Wemby's just kickstarted the excitement of I don't know a single Spurs fan, but the excitement on social media is insane. Jetty Osman actually and Cam Payne were the other two guys that are now on their roster. Their core, they've got Trey Jones, Keldon Johnson, Vassell, Jeremy. I mean, they've got talent there, and it's pop at the end of the day. So they seem to find diamonds in the rough out of nowhere. I still think their primes, if how high their ceiling is still a long time away. Wemby is going to be tested on there. I think I've heard a great point about Wemby. Name escapes me where I heard it before. So he's got a fantastic shoot. I think there's this idea that he's an incredible shooter on there, at least. But he's just got a really nice shooting stroke, so it looks really, really nice. But he shot 29% from three. So I think people are going to be, obviously, people have called him the greatest prospect of all time and greater LeBron and everything. So the pressure is going to be ridiculous. And I think people may get a bit of a reality check. It's a very young core. Wemby's coming into a league. He's played great professional basketball for a while, but the NBA is the top of the top of the top. So a lot of highlights and a lot of excitement. But in terms of translating to wins and climbing the rankings, I have the Spurs 14th and Utah 13th. I'd imagine you have the Spurs shortly after Utah.
Yeah, I had them 13th, so we just had them swapped around the other way. And I'm not really going to argue if you think Utah are going to be better than San Antonio next season. Like, I can't really argue with that. Again, like going through this list, it's just hard to kind of fit in the pieces to this puzzle. And yeah, the Spurs, I just love their young core. Like, I think Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, not only are they really talented young players, but I think they're really winning young players. Like, they're going to impact winning sooner rather than later. And you throw Wemby into that mix. Look, he's going to miss a heap of time. They're going to rest him throughout the season. I agree with you on the shooting. Like, I'd be surprised if he shot more than 30% from three this season. But I think you've got to give a little bit more credit to the rest of this Spurs roster rather than just simply thinking that Wemby's going to come in and do whatever the hell he wants next season, which is probably not going to necessarily transfer to winning. I do actually think with, Greg Popovich, probably arguably the greatest coach of all time, he's not just going to let Wemby come in and do whatever he wants. This is going to be a team that runs a very specific system that gets all their other players involved and will try and play a winning system. And as I said, they've got young players there who I think can impact winning sooner rather than later. And with that being the case, yeah, I've got them just above the Jazz in 13th. Again, I don't expect them to win too many games, but yeah, that's where I've got them. 12, I think we might be aligned on this one as well with kind of the bottom four here. The Houston Rockets, I'm assuming you had as well. I just think they've got a breadth of young talent that basically outdoes the Spurs, the Jazz, and the Trailblazers, at least at this point. And now they've brought in a head coach, obviously an Ime Udoka, who is proven Now, yes, 1 year in the league, but he did get the Boston Celtics really humming into an NBA Finals where they arguably could have won the championship in his first season as head coach. And now they've obviously got a floor general playmaker in there in Fred VanVleet, who can run the offense in a way that they just simply have not had over the last couple of seasons where they've been the worst team in the league. So I'm really looking forward to how a proven head coach and an experienced championship-winning floor general can really impact these young players. Jalen Green, look, I haven't been his biggest fan in the past. I tweeted out a couple of days ago that I think I'd have him 6th in a 2021 redraft. However, I could see him making a massive jump here and being one of the most improved players in the league. I'm expecting Jabari Smith Jr. to be better again next season. You've got Şengün. You've got Thompson obviously coming in through the draft. I guess the big question for me is the dynamic between the younger and the older players. So they've also brought in, Dylan Brooks, I guess, is the main one. They're on a 4-year, $80 million contract. And things could go well. He could bring an edge to Houston that they really need and that Udoka really loves to have in kind of a Marcus Smart fashion. But it could also be, go incredibly wrong where he's taking 15 shots a game and the young players looking at him like, what the hell are you doing? And so I'm just interested to see how that dynamic works between kind of the plethora of young guys and now some of the older guys they've brought in Brooks and VanVleet and the like. So I'm going to assume you had the Rockets in 12th as well.
I also had the Houston Rockets in 12th, and they're one of the biggest talking points of the offseason. The Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, two of the worst volume shooters in the NBA, and they've thrown a lot of money their way. Whether you want to buy into off-season videos or anything, but we knew the talent of Jalen Green. You can see he's been in the gym with a lot of top NBA players as is. So clearly he wants to be the best player and be the best player he possibly can be. Şengün at the World Cup at the moment, goodness gracious, there's a baby Joker, things people are trying to put around him. I thought that's ridiculous. That's relax here. But the playmaking I'm seeing at the World Cup, shooting, he could be anything if he really wants to. Ime Udoka, I've been really high on him. I think the sign of a great coach is how many players can have career years. And yeah, even though he was only there for a year, the level that Tatum, Brown, Smart all went to, I think that's going to also translate into the Houston Rockets. I'm expecting big things. Now, the veterans they got, the Jock Landale sort of thing, they may not be the biggest names, so I think they just take the relief off these younger players. They can step in, give them a good 15 minutes, 20 minutes some nights. And the reason I probably didn't have them any higher is that's a lot of change in a short amount of space. And to go from a team that was laughable to then now all this change. Obviously, Ime Udoka is going to have a new standard. Is going to set there. It's a lot to ask a young team to just suddenly make a huge shift. So very exciting. The Dylan Brooks is going to be the scapegoat for a lot of jokes, I think. But I'm actually hoping well for him in Houston because I think he can play a part. He can be. You just said that Marcus Smart type of role on there. If he takes the other team's best player, hopefully hit open threes. But probably no higher than 12th, not with this amount of change. 11th, who did you have here? Because I think now it gets really interesting.
Yeah. So I think there's a consensus bottom 4 here that I don't think too many people would argue with who we had. You can argue about, the Jazz being a little bit higher and the Spurs being a little bit, whatever you want, but the bottom 4 is kind of a consensus. So now for me, it really comes down to who do I trust in these teams from 11 up, and I've been huge on this team, but the New Orleans Pelicans, I'm losing faith. I really am losing faith. So I guess the positive is you could say, well, Zion is just going to play more than he did last season, and they're going to get more time into him and Bi and CJ together as well, and Jonas Valanciunas and whatever else. I do have a worry with just their lack of shooting because they're really with Zion, Bi, and Jonas Valanciunas front court. I'm just not sure that's going to work. And this is my issue with Zion is I actually think he's just a center in this league. And if he's not a center, he has to be playing like a Giannis role with someone like Brook Lopez, a 5 that's going to be able to stretch the floor and be able to shoot, above average from 3-point range. and I'm not sure Jonas Valanciunas is that man. And then when you add Brandon Ingram into the mix as well, who is an okay 3-point shooter, don't get me wrong, but as we've spoken about before, it's not his go-to. He's more of a mid-range guy, get to the basket, use his length and athleticism. I've been really big on this team in the past. I was really big on them going into last season and then early last season, but I'm just losing faith. And yeah, I don't know. You can talk me into them being a lot better. You can talk me into them being a genuine playoff team, but I just don't hold the trust in them like I do with some of these other teams that I have ahead of them.
I have them exactly at 11th for that very reason. I don't know what to trust. And I think with other teams above them, I can say things with a lot of confidence compared to the New Orleans Pelicans. Because we remember the start of the season when everyone was healthy, they were atop of the West, the excitement machine. We were seeing what Zion could potentially be, and it was devastating for the league. But then obviously any team takes a hit when their best player is out. That's just a given. But the slide they had towards the back end of the season was no one was performing for them, and I think that's quite a worrying sign as a team. I mean, yeah, your entire success hinges on Zion Williamson. He's one of the biggest unknowns. I'm never going to believe that he's off season. But I saw another photo went viral last week of him and he's shooting around. So I'm not going to. If that's what I'll have to gamble on, I'm just going to take the unders, play the conservative role with that. So I think you hit it all on the head. They are probably still figuring out even also what type of team they are, I think you said, because, Zion, you don't know what he is. But there's molds that he could follow, but Giannis is something else, and that is, there's something, they're just not getting the reps to actually figure out exactly what he is, and that's just going to take longer and longer for them to figure out. So, I won't have them any higher than 11th until I can say something with certainty or confidence.
Do you have an issue with kind of their point guard position as well, because they're really, with their starting lineup, they have to go with CJ at the 1, and really, like, I don't hate it. I'm not saying I hate it at all. In fact, I don't mind it. You play CJ at the 1, you run the ball through him and Zion and BI. I'm interested to see like what they do with that kind of 5th position if they've got CJ, BI, Zion, and JV. Is it Herb Jones still, or I just think you have to probably start Trey Murphy? With the lack of shooting in that front court, I think he has to start.
I think that's a massive problem, and probably it went to the slide because when Zion went out, players that can't create their own shot all that well need those easy buckets just to get their own confidence up and be able to get in the flow of an offense. You need somebody, I'm big on having a flawed general of sorts. It may not be a traditional point guard, but even someone like that can just grab the ball. The Harden plays that role. Luka plays that role. I think every team that's a contender that we're going to talk about has somebody that you can throw the ball to and can just calm the offense down and get people easy shots. And until Zion's health is a big thing, but also the next step I think would be figuring that out, having that traditional point guard or playmaker. So absolutely, I agree that that's an issue at the point guard position.
Yeah. So let's move on to 10th. I love this team and I wanted to have them higher, but I just cannot put them above here, and it's Oklahoma City Thunder. I love Josh Giddey. I love Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I love both the Williams. I just love this team, and yet I just cannot find a way to put them any higher than this. And I'm sorry to OKC fans. I couldn't be more optimistic of where your team is heading. I just can't do it. And probably the biggest thing for me is the fact that you haven't made too many kind of win now moves, which is fine. Although I potentially would have liked you to, given the assets you have up your arsenal, or in your arsenal, I should say up your arsenal. That does not sound good. Anyway, in your arsenal. Goodness gracious. Oh boy, that's incredible by me. Absolutely outstanding. Anyway, I can't even move on from there. My point here is that bring in Chet Holmgren, obviously, who's an incredibly talented player, and you'd think he would make them better. However, bring in a piece that big, the number 2 overall pick in last year's draft, I do think there will be kind of a period here of adjustment to see how he fits within the offense when you've got both Jalen Williams and obviously Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander running the show. I'm interested to see how Chet kind of fits into everything. And as I said, there might, especially early in the season, there might be a period of adjustment here where it takes them a while to get kind of up and running and into the kind of offense that they want to run long term. And it could cost them some wins early, which is why I've kind of got them 10th. Whereabouts have you got them higher than that? Because again, I'm not going to argue if you do.
No, I also had them 10th because particularly those moves that you made because David Bertans is the OKC player now. For those that are wondering where he's at the moment, they added. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, but he was the EuroLeague MVP in 2021. He's 29 years old. He's a 6'5" shooter creator. Kind of probably fits that OKC mold where you don't actually know what he is, but he's a playmaker and shooter. And I mean, they're an excitement machine. Chet Holmgren, he just a clean bill of health. He automatically one of the best rim protectors in the NBA. I like the toughness, even though he's obviously a bit lighter. I like the toughness that he plays with, but in terms of it's just not time yet, unfortunately, to have them any higher than this. We're going to now have to be seeing. I mean, they can playoffs and possibly even upset is where they should be aiming for. I think they've got the players that are starting to make those moves. I watched Josh Giddey the other night. It's the game just how easily it comes to him. It's so exciting. I mean, SGA, his style of basketball. I think it's the unique styles that they all have that they'll be so hard to game plan for in a 7-game series. And I'm going to be expecting them to make playoffs. But if we're talking power rankings right now, OKC, I probably can't have them any higher than 10. So I'm in agreement.
Fair enough. Look, number 9 here, I'm getting prepared for an absolute slew of hate here because a couple of weeks ago, a colleague of mine, Josh Cornelison, and I, we kind of delved into the Pacific Division and how that's looking ahead of next season. And we both spoke about the Sacramento Kings and the chances of a slip here. And I uploaded that clip to YouTube and just had an absolute plethora of Kings fans coming in and berating the crap out of us. And fair enough, whatever, but it's not going to stop me from putting the Sacramento Kings 9th in my Western Conference power rankings. And that is a massive slip. I get it. But I just don't see where this team improved in the offseason. And I know a lot of Kings fans are rightly saying to me, well, stability's key. And you look at, what the Warriors did back in, the 2014 kind of 15 period before their first championship, or 2013-14 kind of thing, and the chances they had before that 2015 championship where they could have traded, Klay Thompson for Kevin Love. They could have moved Steph Curry for Andrew Bogut, but that ended up being Monte Ellis and whatever else. And they just kept the same kind of core together. And that's kind of what Kings fans, I think, are hoping for next season, that, you bring back basically everyone and that, another year playing together, that they'll at least remain, one of the top few seeds in the Western Conference. I just don't see it. I think that if you stand pat like this, that teams will just go past you. And I do wonder whether, Sabonis, can he respond from what was a really disappointing playoff performance, or do we think that teams will have potentially worked him out by now? Will he be able to develop that kind of mid-range jump shot that can hurt teams that play off of him? Is Fox going to be able to shoot a similar percentage than he did last season? I have my question marks. Again, it's kind of a marketing thing where does he retain at those kind of shooting percentages, or does he revert to what he's been earlier in his career and for the majority of his career? I just have, Harrison Barnes. Is he still the same quality role player? Are we going to see a 23-year-old Keegan Murray really make a significant jump from his rookie season? Is Kevin Huerter going to respond from what was a disappointing playoff campaign? It's just, there wasn't enough improvement here for me. And if you're not improving with the state of this Western Conference right now, teams will go past you, and they will go past you quickly. And again, Kings fans can look at the stability and bringing everyone back and another year in the system. I understand that, but I don't think it'll be enough, honestly.
I think this is the first time in a long time we've disagreed on a point, so it's actually put a smile on my face. So
good.
I have the Sacramento Kings a few spots above you. I had them 5th again for the stability alone. One thing I love about a team, so obviously, other than winning games and making putting in people, it's the culture shift and the light, the beam. It's the most basic. I don't know who thought it, like how easy, how long it took them to come up with that. But what that did for the city of Sacramento, I was listening to Klay Thompson say he hasn't been in an arena as loud as that since Cleveland in 2016. Which was one of the biggest finals of all time. So the culture they built there, and the fact they're going to they're going to have pretty much the same vibe there. They re-signed Harrison Barnes. That was the biggest signing or biggest thing they did in the offseason. I think they restructured Sabonis' contract. Yeah, they didn't really do anything too crazy, but I think stability plays such a huge part. They had the number one offense. And they got Rashad Holmes' contract off them, so I think they've got a little bit more money than they used to. But I think just continuing because, I mean, Sabonis is 27, Fox is 25, Herter 24, Murray's like 22 as well, 23. So there's so much flexibility and so much they can play around with there. And I bought into it took me a long time to come and believe in the Sacramento Kings. And Fox, I was never entirely sure, but for them to be as young as they are, to what they built in the short space of a year, and the fact they have so much flexibility gets me pretty excited for their future. And if it's just power rankings and regular season with their number one offense, I had them fifth. But my ninth team is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I'll be curious to see where you have them there. They didn't really do anything. Troy Brown Jr. and Shake Milton are the two notable signings, if you want to call them. But the rise of Anthony Edwards, everything that is coming out of the Team USA camp is this is the year that he really puts himself potentially going to have a top 10 season. I mean, the Karl Towns, Rudy Gobert is probably why I have them as low as they are. But I mean, Mike Conley's going to he came in halfway through the season, so he's going to have a full preseason. And Mike Conley's been in the league the fact that he's been in the league this long shows you why he's the point guard that he is. Karl Towns only played 29 games last year. You'd imagine he's going to play a lot more than that. And so we'll actually get hopefully we'll get a full season of actually seeing what this Gobert Twin Tower thing can actually do. And that Karl Towns, as corny as he is on social media, he's still an incredibly talented NBA player. And Anthony Edwards' rise. So I think the fact they're going to have some consistency is, at least I'm knock on wood that they will have some consistency, is why I have some sort of confidence in Minnesota Timberwolves. But again, there's still a lot of question marks as to whether the Twin Towers can work, whether Karl Towns is the guy that you want around Anthony Edwards, because I think if there signs, I think Karl Towns' name will be just watch the trade rumors start swirling around them. The Timberwolves, in terms of what gives you hope around them, first of all, and then secondly, where do you have them, I should say?
Yeah, I've got them eighth. You could talk me into them being, third, fourth, fifth. You could talk me into them being 10th, 11th, 12th. I think there's quite a disparity here in where they could end up. As you said, the whole Gobert Cat dynamic still scares the crap out of me. And you could think that, Cat's going to play more than 29 games next season. Is that actually a good thing? Like, do the two of those players actually work well together, or are they better separate when one of them's out of the lineup? I think Ant is the big one here, because he could really develop into a top 10 player in the league. And if you've got a top 10 player in the league, you really should not be missing the playoffs whatsoever, especially when you've got another all-star level offensive talent in Cat as well. So, yeah, you could, as I said, you could talk me into them being a little bit higher than 8th. You could talk me into them being a little bit lower than that. The Gobert Cat thing just scares me. And as much as I love Ant, I'm going to have to see them on the floor together, Cat and Rudy, and performing consistently for me to be a true believer in them being anything more than a play-in team, really, to try and get in that top 6, obviously. So 8th for you in the West?
The Los Angeles Clippers, very stagnant free agency. I think Russell Westbrook being signed is probably the only thing that made across the newsroom there. I mean, health is they don't really need anything. It's health, just a clean bill of health. And that's something they cannot get in the last 4 years that Kawhi and PG have been together. I mean, I looked at this. There's this stat that came around that the minutes they've shared together, they're much less than like other combos that are known as injury-prone combos. So and another year added to them, another is just not going to make it any easier. So what you mentioned before about trust, it's too much unknown for me. The linking to James Harden, I mean, he's again forcing himself to another team in a short amount of space. Even if they do get him, there's nothing that he really does that's going to make me think that the Clippers are going to be a genuine chance. Too much unknown. I'm just going to expect a repeat of the last 4 years, if not even worse, because they're another year older. There's nothing you can see, surely, that about the Clippers that gives you any faith or confidence that they're going to be any different from years gone by, surely.
Yeah, I had them 7th on my list, just ahead of the Timberwolves. You can't trust PG and Kawhi to play more than 50 games. I think, look, if you could tell me they were going to play 65, 70 games plus, both of them, then you can make the argument that this is still a top 4 roster in the West. The Harden thing, I disagree with you a little bit. I actually think it's going to be a really good thing if they get Harden, just because of their regular season floor. Like, I do think that if PG and Kawhi have injury issues again, which is probably going to be the case, then I actually think, I wouldn't be surprised if they are 10th at the end of the regular season and just miss the playoffs entirely. Like, that's how kind of close this Western Conference is. Like, if the Thunder and the Pelicans, who I have 10 and 11, are better than the Clippers next season, I'm probably not going to be shocked. I'll probably think, yep, PG, Kawhi played less than 50 games each, and the Pelicans and Thunder are talented teams and end up being better than them. That wouldn't shock me. So I do think it would, in that instance, it would shock me if Harden was also in the mix, because Harden, for all the issues surrounding him and everything and the off-court stuff and whatever else, he does take the floor for the majority of the season. And he is a guy that's going to put up numbers, and he is going to be able to run an offense for you in nights where PG and or Kawhi are out. So I do think that he actually not only raises their ceiling a little bit, but I think even potentially more importantly, he really elevates their floor to where, with Harden in the mix, I couldn't see them being any lower than 7th. I couldn't. And I could see them as high as 3rd or 4th. And so I actually think the Harden thing is pretty important to them. Now, whether they actually have the assets to be able to get that done, it doesn't seem likely at the moment with what Daryl Morey's been saying, and he sounds like he wants to basically stand pat until a reasonable offer comes his way, which the Clippers probably cannot provide at all, unless they're going to put Terrence Mann or someone like that in the mix. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. They're a bit hard to judge while this Harden thing is still kind of up in the air. But without Harden, I'm just going to put them 7th. But again, with the injury question marks around PG and Kawhi, they could be anywhere between, let's say, 4th and 11th for mine.
That's not outrageous. And James Harden, man, I just wish I knew what he wanted. This is a bit of a side note, but like in your opinion, we'll again do a whole podcast on this. But what do you reckon he actually? I always thought he just wanted a franchise where he could control everything, because it'd be intoxicating those Houston years where he was the man apparently, and I think Daryl Morey's just said, no, I'm the man here in Philly, and you're not going to just push me around. So I wonder why, if he wants to go to the Clippers. I mean, Stephen Ballmer, like, it's a personality that comes out there. Kawhi and PG aren't overly vocal as like leaders, so I wonder, my at least take from as far away as I am is that he wants to go to Clippers because he can be that guy that is the sort of leader in a way. I don't know. That's James Harden.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So 7th for you on your list?
Dallas Mavericks. A lot of Seth Curry back in the Dallas Mavericks uniform. Dad takes him back in the NBA full stop. So I'm hoping that, I don't know, time away has done something, because I still can't understand why he can't be an NBA player. I feel like there's a lot worse players that are in the NBA at the moment. Grant Williams, probably the biggest one, I guess, off-season signing, and obviously they gave Kyrie Irving that 3-year extension. Grant Williams makes so much logical sense for the Mavericks. I mean, 30, big body. I think he just slides right in as in their 4 position, guard multiple positions, can hit. I've seen him hit multiple threes in big games too. So, and I don't think he's never played with anyone with Luka's playmaking. So I can imagine the amount of open threes that he's going to be able to get. Seth Curry as well. You can't literally leave him open. And who knows, maybe some injury luck balls in terms of don't take him way. they didn't make any moves to go any higher than this for me. Like they made some, like, I guess, shrewd moves, if you want to call them that. They make things a little bit easier for Luka and Kyrie. People hit open threes. Rashad Holmes, I reckon a big man like him would love to play with Luka. The amount of open lobs he's going to be able to get, and if he just runs the floor, that's probably 8-10 points a night if he really wants to. Didn't make the moves that really address their overall thing, which is, again, defense and Luka and Kyrie having the time together. But I mean, Luka's a healthy Luka. Kyrie Irving playing with somebody that great. We've seen when Kyrie Irving's focused, he can be one of the best players in the NBA. So enough moves to help them, which gives me a little bit of confidence, but probably no higher than 7th. I can't imagine you would have had them too much higher.
I've got them 5th. They're one of the big rises for mine. I just, apart from Kyrie, I don't see how they're not a top 5 seed in the West next season. And one of the primary reason I say that is this has to be Luka's year, doesn't it? He's gone into the last couple of seasons basically as MVP favourite, and I'm putting my foot to the ground. This is the year. This has to be the year. And I think, like, Seth Curry and Grant Williams, they're not great players, but I think they do fit really well into this system, particularly Grant Williams. Like, you're bringing now he might not have been a starter with the Celtics, but if you're bringing what I think is a starting level player, like, that makes a considerable difference. And why I think he's a starting level player is, one, he's still young, so he's still on the improve. And two, you mentioned it there, the fact he gets to play alongside Luka. He is going to get so many open looks from Luka Doncic in a way that he never got in Boston. Now, sure, he was playing off Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but they aren't the playmakers. They won't find you in the shooting pocket like Luka Doncic will be able to. And I think he fits absolutely perfectly as kind of a two-way forward. Pop him into the power forward position there. I think defensively it's going to be, a big thing for me with Luka, because I look at kind of their best 5-man, lineups. Does someone like Seth Curry or Tim Hardaway Jr. slide into the 3 in their kind of closing lineups to provide that shooting? And I think that's going to really depend on how well Luka can hold up defensively. And that's one of the biggest issues I've had with Luka in the last couple of years, is that he's 6'7", 6'8", big body. He should at least be able to compete on the defensive end at a much better rate than what he does. And so if I'm Jason Kidd, I'm really emphasizing that, hey, we want you to be an MVP caliber player. And yes, primarily you're going to do that on the offensive side of the floor. But if you can just lift your defensive capacity 25-30%, then not only is that going to help you with your individual reputation and your MVP case around the league, but it's going to make us a way, way better team. So you have him, you have Kyrie, 2 of the most gifted offensive players in the league, and now you've brought in some role players that are really going to fit into that system perfectly. I think this is a team that's ready to take a massive rise. And they're going to need to, because they were probably the most disappointing team in the league last season.
No, I agree with a lot of it. And Luka, I mean, yeah, I feel like he's been in MVP conversations for a lot of years, and I think that could be a narrative. It's just been time enough, so let's just give him the MVP.
Can I just jump in with one more thing there about the Mavericks? I do wonder, I'm interested, because they've got a bunch of centers here who aren't great, kind of thing. Like, JaVale McGee is probably not going to play at all. Obviously, Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber have been there for ages. I do actually think Maxi Kleber might be important to play quite a lot at the 5 as kind of a guy to play, 5-out offense, to spread the offense. You can have him sit in a corner. You can have him out there with Luka and Kyrie, Josh Green, Grant Williams, as I said, play 5-out offense. I think that's going to be important. I just wouldn't be surprised if you see some Grant Williams at the 5 and some real small ball lineups here where you've got maybe Kyrie and Seth Curry and Luka and Josh Green potentially at the 4 and Grant Williams at the 5. I know that's super small, but we know Luka's a fantastic rebounder. I'm going to be interested to see maybe how many minutes that kind of unit gets, where you're actually playing Grant Williams at the 5 a little bit, because their center options, to me, while they've got a few center options, they don't stand out as, hey, this player should be playing more than 25 minutes a night kind of thing. So I'm going to be interested to see how Jason Kidd kind of runs the minutes here and runs the rotation. Anyway, sorry for interrupting. You were onto your what are we up to? Sixth? Yep.
Yeah, six. I had the Memphis Grizzlies. They re-signed Desmond Bain for a lot, big contract. Derrick Rose, Marcus Smart, traded for Josh Christopher out of the blue, which I wasn't just out of nowhere after a season at Houston. I hated the Tyus Jones loss. I really like him as a point guard in any team, and glaringly now that Jar's going to be out for those first 25 games. But Marcus Smart, as I guess if you want to call that a just straight swap, like the Dylan Brooks replacement, I think is a great return. He's been able to always find his, I guess, point at different. I mean, he's played with some big score like Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, Kyrie Irving. He's always been able to find his spots and find his niche, I guess, in there. So I have no problem with him sliding straight there next to Jar and finding, I guess his point of difference. He's tough-minded. He can bring the ball up. He can hit open threes. So I'm really excited for what he's going to do for Memphis in totality. There's only 29 games played between Jaren Jackson Jr., Bain and Jar. They only played 29 games together. So obviously Jar being out for those 25. But, I mean, giving them a good run together is a great recipe. And then throw Marcus Smart's toughness on there. Sixth is because, there's still some – they don't have that, I guess, long proof of being able to be a team together and have their best players out there all at the same time. And the Marcus Smart, again, you're bringing in there. I just expect them to just keep doing what they've been doing the past few years, just keep building. Whether they're going to be, how far away they're from a championship, I'm still not entirely too sure, but I just expect them to just be that fun, exciting young team that they've been in the past few years and be slightly better than they were last year. Do you see much more different with Memphis? Do you have them any higher?
So they finished third last season. So you expect them to you think they'll be slightly better on court, but that other teams will go past them and they'll be sixth, or you're just saying because Jar's going to be out 25 games and they're going to lose a heap at the start of the season?
Well, because I hate, especially your best players not being able to be together, and in fact you only had 29 games with your best players last year, and then this is a step back. I feel like you'll be starting a bit further behind than everyone, so that's why I have them a little bit lower.
Yeah, the start of the season is going to be crucial for them because Jar out for 25 games. Previously, when he's been out, you think, okay, well, we can slot Tyus Jones in there, and we actually, you're not replacing Jar, but they can play in a way that still racks up wins. Like we've seen their record without Jar in the past couple of seasons has been excellent, but a big part of that has been Tyus Jones. If you miss out on him, is Marcus Smart going to be able to come in and just replace that straight up and take on quite a large role with Jar out to start the season? I'm concerned. So, I've got them sixth as well for a lot of the same reasons as you said. Jaren Jackson Jr., love him, defensive player of the year. You get him and Smart together. It should work perfectly. But, I have concerns with Triple J's health and availability. Until I see that over multiple seasons, there's always going to be that concern. Desmond Bain is a fantastic young player. I do wonder if we just start viewing him slightly differently now that he's actually preparing for a $200+ million contract. And, because up until this point, we've seen him one of the steals of the draft in recent times, which is still more than correct. But I just wonder if he starts getting viewed in a different light now that we're saying, hey, okay, hang on, this bloke's about to be on over $200 million. Just interested to see how that plays out, especially early in the season where he is going to take greater responsibility with Jar out. So a little bit interested in that. So you've got the Grizzlies 6. I've got the Grizzlies 6. I had the Mavericks 5th. You had the Kings 5th. So that means we're up to 4th, correct? I've got my Golden State Warriors. What about you?
I also have the Golden State Warriors, and I'll leave the floor to you, and keen to hear why you have them fourth, first and foremost.
Yeah, well, obviously they finished. I should have said before the Grizzlies finished second last season, didn't they? And the Kings finished third, and then obviously both teams lost in the first round. I said before that the Grizzlies finished third. Anyway, the Warriors. So heavy win now approach this offseason, and you can say what you want, I guess, about the Jordan Poole for Chris Paul trade. I do think that in the immediate short term that Chris Paul is going to be a better fit for the Warriors next season than Jordan Poole would have been. So I guess for me as a Warrior fan, the biggest optimistic piece, I guess, of that trade was the fact that every team and we're racking up a few teams now that Chris Paul has been to, he is made better in the first season that he's been there. And so you add him to the mix. I think Clay should be better again next season. I don't see Dre dropping off. Steph is Steph. Andrew Wiggins is the big one for me. I think people forget the fact that he played 37 regular season games last year. Like, this is a player that was an all-star and the second best player in a championship team like 12 months ago. I do think that is a bit of a point that people, I guess, forget about, is that previous to last season, he'd basically played 70-plus games every year in his career. So, again, I'm going to just put him down as returning to that, a 70-plus game player, a two-way talented forward who can be a perfect 3-and-D player with a little bit of self-isolation, creation off the dribble as well, if need be. I think that's a massive factor. You add him to the mix, I think they can make the jump, I guess, in the regular season anyway, from a team that finished sixth to a team that finished fourth. It's not a huge jump, but I think Wiggins back into the mix, and I think CP3 there. You also get a full year with Gary Payton II. Again, this is going into the real kind of role player territory where Gary Payton II is possibly the 9th or 10th best player on the Warriors. Just from a cultural kind of perspective, I think the loss of him last offseason, obviously we know what happened with the whole Dre, Jordan Poole incident, but there was an infectious attitude and culture, I think, that Gary Payton II brought in that championship season, and that just disappeared entirely at the start of last season and throughout the course of last season. And there's just something about him in terms of the culture that I think means a lot to the Warriors. And I know there's a lot of talk that they've still got 2 open roster spots at the moment. And one of the players being considered and who's been worked out for potentially that 14th roster spot is Juan Toscano-Anderson. And he's, again, a player that not many people are going to be like, who the hell cares? JTA sucked for the Lakers last season. Not much better with the Jazz once he got traded there. Again, the Warriors lost something with their culture and their identity when he left and he departed, and in combination with GP2. So I think from a Warrior perspective here, it's really about the vibes of the team early next season. And that should be, the issues there should be alleviated quite a bit with the Draymond JP thing not being an ongoing headache like it was last season. Now it's really about whether Chris Paul will actually accept and take on a sixth-man role like everyone thinks he should, but that yet he's yet to kind of fully commit to, and is certainly publicly just reiterating the fact that, hey, this is a decision that will come up in training camp and really hasn't been discussed till this point. So just going to be interesting to see kind of the vibes early next season, because that was the thing with the Warriors last season. I don't think it was necessarily the talent out on the floor that was the issues. It was just the culture, and the culture that has been built over a decade that's won 4 NBA championships just disappeared last season. And yes, there were signs that they could get it together at points, but they were never really able to establish any major momentum to go any further than the second round.
Well, I, again, agree with so much of what you said already. And I'm not worried about the CP3 fit, whether that is a sixth man or the starting position, because we talked about Houston before and the huge changes that they were having. They're too young of a team to be able to deal with a lot of change, but Steph's smart, Kerr's smart, Draymond's smart. Like, their entire front office first class. So I think if it was any other franchise, I'd be pretty worried. But the fact that he impacts winning wherever he goes and he's going to a well-run organization, the fit itself, that doesn't really bother me on the slice. You have to expect jumps from Kuminga and Moody. Wiggins being there for the full season's also massive. The one thing I was hoping to actually ask you today, being you tapped into the Warriors, was because the road record was a huge glaring thing from last year. So do you think that I guess Wiggins being healthy, adding CP3, I don't know what that's going to have impact on the road record, jumps from Kuminga, like, I guess, stability, do you think that's going to answer? Because that was glaring last year, and you're normally a good road team. So that was something I wanted to see if they've addressed it enough in the offseason.
Yeah, and again, I can't reiterate it enough. I think it's the cultural kind of standpoint here, where I think last season they almost lost the want to play together and want to win for each other at certain elements, and that's a huge motivation, obviously. And I think when you're at home, you can find other motivations. You can find the home crowd is the biggest, obviously, aspect of that. You can find motivation through your home crowd to really bring the energy and to rack up wins. But when you're on the road, you're a little bit tired, and when you don't have that kind of connectedness and that symmetry with your teammates, then I think that becomes glaring on the road, and that's what ended up resulting in their horrific road record last season. So honestly, that's what I think it is. They're just the vibes from the Jordan Poole, Draymond Green incident just really impacted this team in a way that I don't think can be underestimated. And that's going to be the biggest thing, is not necessarily the on-court stuff next season. It's going to be getting the off-court stuff right in training camp, in preseason, that then produces on-court results in a positive manner.
Yeah, I mean, the Warriors are always at the top of the West, just as is. And I mean, Steph seems to be like aging the other way in terms of the players around him and his cohort. So, just going to expect more of the same, unfortunately, with the Warriors that I've had to subject to. The Lakers, I had third. First question I want to ask: do the Lakers have unlimited money? Because AD, I saw re-signed to like a 3-year 180 or something like that. Rui, Reeves, D'Lo all re-signed without any sort of like. I think Bill Simmons threw up his hand saying, "Why didn't any teams try and troll the Lakers and try and offer Reeves 100 mil or Rui 100 mil?" But no teams. I mean, Rob Pelinka's had a phenomenal 12 months, I call it, with the mid-season moves he made, and even this off-season. Players like Jackson Hayes and Prince, and like they're the type of players, like no, they're not household names, but the type of players that work well with LeBron and AD. And I wonder why the Lakers in the past years gone by have just completely deviated from players that defend and shoot and run the floor, because that's the type of players that work best for LeBron and AD. I think they just need their role players just to quite literally just be average, and they'll be okay. And obviously, health will never not be an issue, I should say, for like LeBron's a year 21. Is LeBron James, but year 21 is a big ask. I expect them the depth of talent, and actually having a preseason together, having a full season with so many different moves, and I saw what Bree's been doing with Team USA. It looks seriously impressive. So the Lakers, on paper at least, is why I have them as number 3. Do you agree with a lot of that? Do you have them any higher than 3?
No, I have them as 3 as well. But again, the LeBron AD kind of tandem, if there's injury issues there, they could fall off here again a little bit. Like, again, if we come to the end of the season and LeBron's played 50 games and AD's played 50 games and neither of them can get on the floor for 60 plus games, then there's a chance here they're back in the play-in mix. I mean, they were last season, and they were even worse than that before they made all the moves at the trade deadline, obviously. So I don't know. Like, I think I have to respect LeBron. I have to respect what they did at the end of last season. I have to have them third, but they're not a guarantee to be back up there again for me next season. And I know from my perspective, I had the Warriors and the Lakers on the exact same rung. And the only reason I put the Lakers ahead of the Warriors is simply because they won that second round matchup. But otherwise, I think it's pretty even. And I mean, this whole Western Conference is pretty even here from probably 2 through to 10 or 11. So, yeah, the Lakers, there's some issues I think that I have with them that aren't necessarily, as I said, they're not a guarantee for third for mine. I do think they need some insurance for LeBron and AD. Now, is Austin Reeves all of a sudden going to be the absolute third best player on a championship team where, LeBron or AD could be out on any given night and Austin Reeves can kind of step up, run the offense in a way that's going to be able to still give your team a chance of winning games when one of the big two are out? I don't know here, because I do think that the Russell Hachimura contracts that they gave out, to me, that they're just deals waiting to be combined for a $35 million player. And whether that's Kyrie Irving or not, I'm not sure. It could be. I think Dallas will be pretty good next season, so I don't think it'll be Kyrie Irving. But yeah, I just wonder here whether the Lakers, if they start having some injury issues to AD and LeBron, which historically it would suggest they may, do they does Pelinka pull the trigger here on another big move where they bring in a $35 million player who's like Harden, for example. Are they a team for Harden? Honestly. Like, if you're saying, like, D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, I'm just trying to think of who else. Like, Max Christie's a talented young player. Maybe, like, those three players for Harden. What do Philadelphia say about that? I don't know.
Yeah. I just don't know why the Lakers go away from it, because they won a championship with AD, Bron, and just roll like 3-and-D players. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I've seen them do overhauls the wrong way around. I'm like, why would you change it? So, I mean, you've got a ticking time bomb, and you've got to at least show that you're trying to build a roster around LeBron and AD, because who knows how much longer you have them.
I guess for mine, it's just the insurance of, I guess, can Reeves be that insurance? Because, again, I'm going to have a hard time believing that LeBron and AD are going to play more than 60 games. So in those 20, 30 games, is Reeves good enough to be the second guy where you can still potentially win a host of those games? Or do they need someone else like a Harden to be able to come in and play that role? Now, you are correct in saying they kind of did that. They brought in Westbrook for that purpose. And I think when Westbrook came in, they thought, well, here we've got a guy who can be a regular season floor raiser, where LeBron and AD, there won't be the responsibility on them. They can rest a few games, and we'll still have Westbrook who can run our offense and can potentially help us win games when those two guys are out. So that obviously was a complete disaster. I do think someone like Harden would be a much better fit than Westbrook when it comes to playing alongside LeBron and AD. But yeah, I'm just interested to see what may happen there.
Yeah, it's the Lakers, so I'm sure we'll do many podcasts throughout the season and their moves. The Phoenix Suns, I had second. Obviously, Brad Beal took up so much of their cap room, but then they're able to make some sneaky moves with the little that they could. And I think the players like Gordon, I think, are going to complement fantastically. Their entire title hopes are on that big four of theirs, and whether DeAndre Ayton is part of their big four in this time is another question. I think he's probably one most likely to be traded mid-season if things aren't looking good. Why I have them so high, I think, and probably I'm starting to believe in them as potentially winning the title, is the Devin Booker rise, because he has gone to another level every single year, and I just love watching him and the toughness that he comes with. And I'm excited for him to take over and actually announce himself as the guy on that team. Because Kevin Durant is he's, I guess, star with him. Kevin Durant has always thrived as being, I guess, the best player, but having that's like Russ or Steph or somebody else to kind of like be the main guy, and him just being this probably the most dangerous second, if you want to call him a second option, I'm putting that in quotation marks. And I've found teams have just gone to another level when the KD kind of goes into that role as best player, not necessarily the leader. And so Booker embraces that leader aspect to him because he's giving every sign that he is. And then Kevin Durant can focus on purely basketball and help elevating the team in so many other ways. I think the Phoenix Suns could pretty much go all the way. What role Bradley Beal will play is still going to be up in the air, but I think that big four is extremely exciting, and it's definitely going to be a watch. Phoenix Suns and trusting them to win the championship? Is that the conversation you've had with yourself or anyone at all, or
I mean, they're like a lot of these other teams. They're like the Lakers, who we just mentioned. They're like the Warriors with their veteran core with 4 players over 33 years old. They're like the Mavericks a little bit when you're talking about Kyrie Irving. They're like the Clippers when you're talking about PG and Kawhi Leonard. It's really going to come down to a health and availability thing here. And again, they've got the insurance in place where the Lakers don't, where you can be missing KD or Beal or Booker on any given night, and you've still got, 2 stars there and whatever you want to call DeAndre Ayton. Like, not a star, but a very high level role player with the potential of being a star. I don't even know what you classify him at this point. I am interested to see with Frank Vogel, with a new coach, a more defensive-minded coach, if Ayton can have a little bit more of a role here, particularly defensively. And that's, I think, going to be the big thing for him, is how Frank Vogel, obviously, the relationship between he and Monty Williams, declined significantly over the final 12 months of Williams' tenure at the Suns. And I'm just interested to see, can Frank Vogel get DeAndre Ayton in a mindset where he can have a really big defensive impact, which can then hopefully build his confidence to have a little bit more of an offensive impact as well. Because even though he doesn't have CP3 there to kind of, create for him in the pick and roll and whatever else, I do think that he's still going to get his fair share of opportunities if he's engaged enough, playing alongside Book, who I just cannot wait for another rise from him to see what he can do playmaking-wise. Beal is a strong enough creator. He's obviously had a lot of years at the Wizards with the ball in his hands, kind of running the offense, so he can do that. And KD's a more than willing passer as well. So I think Ayton will still get his looks. It's more about how engaged he's going to be, how engaged he can be on the defensive end. And as you said, I like what they did kind of with their minimum deals in free agency. They did what they could with the resources available to them. Eric Gordon's one of the steals of free agency. Yuta Watanabe was one of the best corner three-point shooters, playing alongside Kevin Durant last season. They brought back Josh Okogie, who, covering the Suns a little bit last off-season, I was really hesitant on his pickup and whether he should be in the league at all, given his offensive limitations. I was actually surprised with how good he was for them last season, so to be able to bring him back, I think, is a positive. Same can be said for Damian Lee, and one of the most underrated ones where, a lot of people wouldn't have watched much of him last season, but Keita Bates-Diop, I think, is for kind of, again, defensive purposes, I think can be a big pickup for them as well. Drew Eubanks, I think, is a solid backup big to play behind Ayton, to play, 15, 18 minutes a night, I think is solid. Bol, I won't mention him in this conversation, but I already have. It was worth a mention. Anyway, just for the meme purpose. I think out of those, like if you're talking about Gordon, Watanabe, Okogie, Lee, Bates-Diop, I think you can kind of find a fifth player there, kind of for your closing lineups, depending on what the game requires at any certain point throughout the season. So I think they're going to be just way too talented to not be a top 2 team in the league next season, in the Western Conference at least next season, unless there's some serious injuries here to Beal or Durant, which is potential, unfortunately, and that's what we're saying with a lot of these teams who are veteran teams with older players.
Yeah, the top of the West is going to be a battle, and I can't just wait for the playoffs alone. I mean, how deep we can go, and I think you said from 4 to 11. You could probably throw any of those teams in, and I wouldn't be surprised. That leaves the Denver Nuggets as our number 1, and not to me the Bruce Brown kind of just leaving. I didn't really like, and then they used their mid-level on Reggie Jackson, and I swear Reggie Jackson, I didn't see him in the playoffs at all, so I was kind of confused on there. But I guess when you have one of the greatest centers of all time, that tends to cancel out most bad moves. I mean, the core 5 is still there, still young, and all under contract, and obviously love playing with each other. So that's all I really need to say as to why I have number 1. I mean, Jokic has been damn near averaging a triple-double for the past 3 years on ridiculous efficiency. And I mean, it's really hard to kind of fault this team with their youth. So the dynasty talk is always premature, I think. But, I mean, they have all the makings of a dynasty with their age and everything. I can't see you disagreeing or not expecting them to even at a minimum make the finals.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to displace them. I don't think they are. I mean, you speak about dynasty, it's always premature. I mean, even in an AFL context, I remember people, Geelong winning the flag last year, and everyone's like, geez, who's going to beat the Cats? They're gonna win easily next year, and now they've just not even made the finals, not even made the top 8. So I think these conversations always happen during the off season, after a championship or a premiership in whatever sport it is. It's how are we going to topple these guys? And it is difficult when you see the Nuggets because of their youth and because of the fact that Jokic, it's crazy to say Nikola Jokic might not be in his prime yet. And that is just crazy to say. and neither is Jamal Murray, neither is Michael Porter Jr. And Aaron Gordon certainly isn't getting worse. Let's put it that way. So that when you've got that core four in place, it's hard to see them dropping away here at all. And really, they should be getting better. Look, Bruce Brown and Jeff Green, big losses, but Christian Brown in his rookie season, really impressive. Can he just come in and take those Bruce Brown minutes and be a guy that can average 25 to 30 minutes a game as kind of your sixth man? Potentially. Peyton Watson's another young talent who could come in and play a role. So I don't think that the Bruce Brown, Jeff Green losses are hugely detrimental. Would you have preferred to keep them? Yes. Would I want to re-sign Bruce Brown on $20+ million? Well, the Nuggets didn't even have the chance to. They didn't have his bird rights or anything to be able to offer him that. So, yeah, I just don't see them going anywhere it's just crazy to me that Nikola Jokic is the best player in basketball, and it's probably not particularly close after what we just saw in the playoffs. And yes, I mean he's not going to get any worse anytime soon, and he's probably only getting better.
Yeah, so I looked it up and said he's 28 years old, so he might have a minimum another 5-6 years of this domination. But the Western Conference, it was actually quite a lot tougher than the Eastern Conference for mine. Even that 4-11 range. So, and I don't think our season's completely finished on that end. But mate, the excitement of the NBA, it's only a few months away. So, are you going to do fantasy this year? I saw the fantasy chat's been popping up at all.
I don't think. I mean, didn't I get? I got removed from the chat. I think because I didn't play last season. So I always find it hard to play NBA fantasy just because obviously you kind of got to set your team for every day, and I know you can do that kind of at the start of the week and whatever else. I just find it difficult, picking players up off the waiver wire and dropping players and whatever else. I find it so much more difficult than like AFL fantasy where you just make 2 trades a week and that's it. You pick your captain, vice captain, emergencies, whatever else. So I don't know. Wait and see. I had a horrible AFL fantasy year. I was on top at about round 10 and then didn't even make the finals. An absolute bloody disaster. So I'm out of form when it comes to fantasy. But anyway, thanks for joining me, mate. You got much planned for this week?
Not much. We've got a big clash, you and I, this Friday night. Pies, Bombers. So we have to. I don't know how confident I am to put something on it, but
yeah. You need to respond after a 126-point loss. That's like, I don't even know how to compare that in NBA terms. That's like when the Thunder lost to the Grizzlies by, was it 69 points a couple of seasons ago? That was just, incredible. Anyway, thanks, mate, and we'll talk soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.